There was a guy at work named Tim. He had a reputation for taking on everything. If there was a project, he volunteered. If there was a problem, he said, I'll handle it. You know that guy? One day his boss walked by and saw Tim buried under a mountain of sticky notes. He had 3 empty coffee cups on his desk and a to-do list that looked like the Dead Sea Scrolls. The boss said, Mark, are you doing okay? Tim said, absolutely. I've got everything under control. Right then, his printer jammed, his phone rang, his email dinged, and his lunch exploded in the microwave. The boss shook his head and said, you're not running the office. This office is running you. Tim sighed and said, I think I need a Jethro. The boss raised an eyebrow, just looked at him and said, what? Tim said, you know, Exodus 18, Moses tried to do everything himself until Jethro showed up and said, this thing you do is not good. Again, he said, I think I need a Jethro. You know, every servant of God eventually reaches a Moses moment where work feels bigger than their strength. Ministry grows, needs multiply, people look to you for answers, and even faithful leaders can become weary. Exodus 18 is a gift to every pastor, every parent, every leader, every believer who wants to serve God well without burning out. God used Jethro, who was Moses' father-in-law, to teach Moses and us how God strengthens his servants. If Moses, the greatest leader in the Old Testament, could get overwhelmed by trying to carry too much, then it's no surprise that each of us do as well. And just like Moses needed Jethro's wisdom, we need God's wisdom for our workloads, for our responsibilities, and for all the pressures that we carry. And so in Exodus 18, would you look at verse 1? We see firstly that God sends encouragement when we need it most. Verse 1 says, when Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of which the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been an alien in a strange land, and the name of the other Eleazar, for the God of my father, said he, was mine help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses in the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses, I, thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife and her 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh, and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifice for God. And Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moses, father-in-law, before God. Jethro arrived at just the right time. Moses had led Israel out of Egypt, as God said, led them through the Red Sea miraculously, and now for some weeks into the wilderness. And Moses is carrying the weight of the nation. And what does God do? He sends someone who will listen to Moses. We see in verses 7 through 8, they sat down and they talked to one another. You know what you need in times of encouragement? You need someone who will listen to you. Someone says, great, because I like to talk all the time. Drew and I had a planning meeting, and we sat down for breakfast, and behind me, the guy talked the entire time. What he needed to do was listen. You want to know what he talked about? He talked about how all women are the same, and they're selfish, and there's just like only one or two women in the world that are good, and he's just trying to find the right woman. Oh boy, I had some things I wanted to say. He looked kind of rough, and I wasn't there to correct him, but I just couldn't. Our heads were about 1.5 feet away from each other, maybe less. Just hearing this guy talk, and when you need times of encouragement, yes, you need someone to listen to you, but you need to be in a conversation. And someone who's going to listen to help you, someone that will understand. And this was Jethro, someone who knows you. Jethro knew Moses for 40 years. Moses worked for him for 40 years, remember? When Moses came on the backside of the wilderness and he had that flock of sheep, those were Jethro's sheep. And he'd been doing that for 4 decades. And so now back in Midian and back going through all this hard time, and God sends Moses encouragement, someone to listen to Moses. Verse 9, we see someone to rejoice with Moses. Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness with the Lord. Someone that's going to encourage you is not just someone who's going to talk about problems. And if you have problems and you go to people that are just going to talk to you about the negative and talk about your problems, and you're just going to stay there and park it there and just talk about all the hardships in life, but it's never going to rejoice in the goodness of God, that's not someone who is going to encourage you. Someone who is going to encourage you is going to listen to you and really sympathize, but they're also going to be someone that is going to point your attention and talk about all the good things that God has done. And that was Jethro. God sent him someone also that was going to worship with Moses. Verses 10 through 12, we see they worshiped. He offered a burnt sacrifice, an offering to the Lord. They bowed and they humbled themselves before God. And then obviously to strengthen Moses. This was the encouragement Moses needed. He had been through a lot for the last 3 months. And God often strengthens us through people. And those people at times are friends, mentors, family, fellow believers, just someone or those people who will remind us of God's faithfulness. Here's our truth for today. Don't isolate yourself. Everyone needs a Jethro at times. Don't isolate yourself. I find that most of us, if not all of us, usually we get in trouble when we just push everybody away. Oh, we need daily times quiet times with God. We need to walk with God. But we can't go through life disassociating ourselves from our family and our friends. In fact, in those moments where we feel like pushing away, it's especially in those times that we need someone in our life, a Jethro in our life, to encourage us when we feel down, when we feel like quitting. Hey, if you're a child of God, God's already most likely, He sent somebody to encourage you, so don't isolate yourself. Everyone needs a Jethro at times. So this is how God strengthens His servants. He sends encouragement when we need it most. Number 2, God reveals when our load is too heavy. He reveals when our load is too heavy. Verse 13 through 18, right? Jethro has come. They've greeted one another. They've worshiped the Lord. They've rejoiced. And now back to daily business. And it came to pass, we read in verse 13, on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. Who wants to hear people's problems minimum 12 hours a day? Anybody here like that? Even counselors shut their office off at times, turn their phones off at times. And here Moses, so if it's morning to evening, typically that's a good 12 hours. We read on, and Moses said unto his father-in-law, Moses' father-in-law saying, what is this thing that thou doest to the people? Verse 14. Jethro's watching this. He says, "Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning even unto even?" And Moses said unto his father-in-law, "Because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws." And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, "The thing that thou doest is not good." And for those who have too heavy of a load, and you're just continuing doing too much and taking on too much, it is good for you to hear today, the thing that thou doest is not good. You're doing too much. Verse 18, right? The person that's there to encourage him, cares about him. Hey, Moses gave Jethro some grandsons, so they got a good relationship going here, right? Jethro says, verse 18, "Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee, for this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone." So we see this next day after Jethro shows up, he watches Moses judge the people morning to evening. He sees what Moses can't see. And usually when you're heavy, you've taken on too much, we get blinded. We get only focused on, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to finish this, and here's a deadline here. And we're kind of just lost in the load. And we need a Jethro to tell us, the thing that thou doest is not good. You're going to wear away. If you keep up this pace, you're not going to be able to make it. And the people that are around you, they're going to wear away also. Moses wasn't sinning. Let's be just transparent here. Moses wasn't disobeying God by what he was doing. He was simply doing too much alone. You with me? Even the strongest leaders break when they carry what God never intended them to carry alone. God never designed ministry or life to be a one-man or a one-woman show. Who rejoices in that, say amen. So here's our truth for today. Would you read it with me? On the screen, go. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to admit, I need help. I don't need anybody's help. If you ever say, I don't need help, that's a sure sign you need help. And that term, when we hear that, usually that's a negative connotation. Like something's going on and someone will say to us, maybe snarkily or sarcastically, you need help. Usually that's a negative thing when someone's, or like an accusatory thing like, you've got a problem. But the reality is, everybody needs help. We all need help. It's okay that we need help. God made us to need help. I'm going to say that again. God made us to need help. His help and others' help. We are not self-sufficient and self-reliant. We are fully dependent upon God, and we are extremely dependent upon others as well. And so, the life lived by, I don't need anybody, I don't need anybody's help, that is in direct contrast to how God designed us to live. We all need help. And so, maybe the most spiritual thing you can do, or maybe the most spiritual thing you've done in a long time, is to right now, in this hour, admit, I need help. If you're like me, that doesn't feel good. I have been here in the last several months more than once. And I don't like admitting I need help. But it's a lot easier when you recognize it and you humble yourself. I need help. Number 3, how does God strengthen His servants? God provides a better way. God provides a better way. We find in verse 19, God speaking through Jethro, Hearken now unto my voice, I will give thee counsel. Watch, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people, watch this, able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10, and let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. And all this people shall go to their place in peace. So here is Jethro's Spirit-filled plan, just what he gives to Moses. What he's saying here, firstly, stand before God for the people. Stand before God for the people. Let's simplify it. What he's saying in verse 19, Moses' first calling was prayer. Please listen. There is nothing greater than that you can do than pray. Are you processing right now the things you want to do, you want to accomplish, the things you want to take on? The projects you want to start, the projects you want to complete, the obstacles you want to overcome. Wait a second. Is there anything more important than you and I can do than have a conversation with God? There isn't. This is what is the strength. Where a leader, a parent, a teacher, someone, this is where you get your strength. Before you tell others what to do and before you help others, you yourself are in conversation with God. This is your first calling, Moses. If you're a parent, this is your first calling. If you're husband, spouse, this is your first calling. If you're a pastor, this is your first calling. If you're a leader in some capacity, you are helping someone else, this is your first calling. Prayer. Secondly, then teach people God's word. Clarity reduces chaos. Because we weren't there, it's hard to imagine. But we can imagine pretty well if the Bible, which the Bible is accurate, if there were 600,000 fighting men only, not including the older men, not including their wives or any of the women or any of the kids, it's highly likely that there were 1, 2, 3, 4 million Israelites. Are you getting this? Everybody that has a matter, right? It's not however many million every day, but however many thousands and thousands of them that have a matter or a disagreement with someone, and they're standing in line waiting for Moses. I don't know about you, but I don't like to stand in line for 30 minutes for anything. Who's like that? Who likes standing in line? Raise your hand. But that's your only option. You got to talk to Moses. I don't know how long that daily line was, but I don't want to be in that daily line. It seemed like chaos. So many disagreements, so many questions. What did people need? They needed clarity. Do you know we live in a world that is in chaos? This is what God's people have that the world doesn't. Clarity. This is a Spirit-filled plan. Pray first, teach God's word to the people. Thirdly, select godly leaders. Select godly leaders. We are so far removed from our nation's history. It used to be the moral and spiritual character that typified what type of person you voted for office. What was their faith in Jesus? What was their belief on certain things in the Bible? And that's how you voted. You wanted a godly leader. Now we just vote on someone's record, we vote on someone's past history, or just, honestly, we just vote on people's promises today. You know, if they told me that they'll get me the moon, so I'm going to vote. I believe they'll give me the moon. I believe that they'll do this or they'll do that. Sad to say that moral character isn't a priority today. But it ought to be with the people of God. And it is a priority when God raises up people to help others. He wants godly people. You notice what verse 21 said, verse A? Look at these type of people. Able men who fear God, men of truth, men who hate covetousness. God, give us more men like that today. I think we have a surplus of men today who are unabled men, men who don't fear the Lord, men who live according to untruths or things that aren't truth, men who are covetous. Those men are a dime a dozen out there. You and I know plenty of men like that. God raise us up some men. And you know, if this church is going to grow, it's going to be because there are men and women who are able, who are, as verse 21 says, men and women who fear God, men, women who are people of truth, who not just say, I believe the Bible, someone who knows the Bible, someone who can turn to it and show you what truth is. Someone, you look at verse 21, hating covetousness, someone that puts people over possessions. God says, those are the type of men, those are the type of people. And fourthly, delegate the work. It was Moses' job to share the load. Share the load so more people could be cared for. I imagine that, it had to have been with that many people that, you're in that long line and the sun goes down. I don't know how they did it, but they weren't dumb, but maybe there was a ticket or a number, I don't know, and just you had to just bring your number and get back in line the next day. Remember who you were behind. Because I stood in line all day, but I didn't get in line to talk to Moses. So I got to get back in line the next day. Maybe that happened a couple days. But it wasn't good. And people weren't being helped. And this is a Spirit-filled plan. This wasn't lowering the standard. It was multiplying the ministry. Godly people are still needed and are an important part in the work of the ministry. Delegation isn't a weakness on a leader's part. Delegation is wisdom. It allows leaders to focus on what only they can do, and it allows others to grow in their calling as well. You know, one of the best ways to learn the Bible is to be a teacher. The person who learns the most in every lesson, in every message that's taught and preached every Sunday, every Wednesday, every discipleship hour that we have several in the church being discipled, the ones who are learning the most and growing the most are the ones who are studying and preparing and then teaching. If you have a heart to learn and a heart to grow, start being trained to be a teacher. because you'll learn more than anybody else. What a privilege it is to handle the Word of God. And what an exciting thing it is as a pastor to see others growing in their calling. Our truth for today: God's work grows healthiest when God's people share the load. God's work grows healthiest when people share the load. It was just a title. It wasn't an issue for me. But when I was what would be deemed as an assistant pastor ordained, a church that I worked for, the pastor was very emphatic. There was only one pastor. I was the music director. I was the youth director, but the church could not have more than one pastor. And I remember more than once someone saying, "This is our youth pastor," and him interjecting, "He's the youth director." And he would get upset about it. And then I'd hear about it. I said, "I didn't tell him to say that." But he was very emphatic. "I'm the pastor." I'm like, "Got it, no problem, right? I'll be the director. I just want to serve and do a good job." We're not talking about titles. We're talking about servants, godly servants. People say, people and the work of the Lord is more important than me just showing up and sitting here. But growing and being discipled and getting involved and sharing our faith in the community. But the way that God's work grows healthiest is when we share the load. And lastly, how does God strengthen His people? God blesses obedient leadership. God blesses obedient leadership. Verse 24, "So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land." So here we see Moses listened, he obeyed, he appointed leaders, and what were the results? The people were served better, Moses was strengthened, the load was shared, and the community of God's people flourished. And then Jethro goes home rejoicing. For Moses, the ministry became joyful again. The people grew. The leader endured. Here's our truth for today. When we follow God's pattern, prayer, teaching, shared leadership, and humble obedience, God blesses the work. Exodus 18 teaches us that God cares not only about what we do for Him, but how we do it. He strengthens His servants by sending encouragement, by revealing our limits. Yes, that's a good thing that we are faced with our limits. God provides wisdom, multiplies leadership, and He blesses obedience. So who here today, I wonder, feels stretched, tired, overwhelmed? Remember, God never asked you to carry your load alone. God is the God who strengthens His servants.